session after lunch, so I know everyone's a bit sleepy, a bit hot, a bit tired. But just to introduce myself, because I know I'm a new face to most people in this room, my name's Dr. Lauren Clark. I work for the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent in Geneva in the head office. My official title is Senior Officer for Medical Services and Emergencies, but really what that translates into is that I govern and look after the 16 EMTs that Red Cross, Red Crescent hold. This includes 5 Type 2s and 11 Type 1s currently, and we're always ever expanding. So it's an absolute pleasure to be here today with such a diverse and distinguished panel. So what we're going to discuss today is about sudden onset disasters and the evolution and roles of teams. We're here today to share challenges and lessons learned by the EMTs and our lovely speakers here. These guys have all encountered various different challenges and have many lessons learned, particularly over the past few challenging years, and they're all here to kind of share their different ideas and different lessons with us all. So I'm just going to introduce everyone in order of speaking to begin with. So right here next to me is Dr. Anna. Dr. Anna is a medical doctor who has become the medical superintendent of, apologise for my pronunciation, Viola Hospital in Tonga. She's also the chairperson for the Tonga Emergency Medical Association team, and they've just had their first national deployment after the most recent volcanic eruption and tsunami. Next to Dr. Anna, I have Wojtek Wilk, who is the Chief Officer of PCPM, which is the Polish Centre for International Aid and one of the largest Polish NGOs. He's also the manager of the Polish Type 1 EMT, who we've also seen in the hall over the past few days. In the last couple of years, PCPM have undertaken 7 COVID response missions, in addition to their sudden onset disaster missions, which include sudden onset disasters in Lebanon and most recently Madagascar. And today, Wojtek is here to talk to us in particular about the Madagascar mission and all of the challenges that they faced there, and also how quickly that they adapted to the situation. Next to Wojtek, we have Dr. Elliot Tenpenny, who is an emergency medical doctor who serves as the director for the International Health Unit for Samaritan's Purse. Dr. Tenpenny has an extensive international experience kind of portfolio, including having been deployed in the DRC, Iraq, Haiti, and also really interestingly, also responded to the COVID-19 pandemic as the emergency field hospital director in New York City and California. Most recently, though, however, he has been the medical lead in the Ukraine conflict response. However, today, what Dr. Tenpenny is going to be presenting about is about the response to the Haiti earthquake back in August 2021. Then next to Dr. Tenpenny, I have Corona Rintawan, who is an emergency medical specialist with over 20 years of experience, both nationally and internationally. And I think I could probably easily spend half an hour just introducing him. Currently appointed as the General Secretary of the Indonesian Association of Emergency Medicine and the Vice Chairman for Muhammadiyah, the COVID-19 Command Centre, and also part of the Central Board. As I said previously, has a huge portfolio of international deployments and is also incredibly active in our working groups here, including highly infectious diseases and making significant contributions to the Red Book. And then finally, on the end, is Marta Catalinas, who is the head of emergencies at the Department of Emergencies and Post-Conflict of the Humanitarian Action Office of the Spanish Agency for International Development Cooperation. The Department of Emergencies coordinates the Spanish EMT 2 START project, and really interestingly as well, Marta also holds an MSc in environmental biology. And prior to joining the organisation in 2021, she worked in water-related development projects in both public and private sectors for over 15 years. But today, however, she's going to be talking about their first experiences of a sudden onset disaster response with regards to the publication of the new Blue Book and how they've adapted their practice. But to begin with, if you would all just like to put your hands together for Dr. Anna, who's going to be presenting about their national EMT deployment in Tonga. If I could invite you up to stage.
Maloelele and Pacific welcome to you all. I'd like to acknowledge the conveners of this meeting and our host, the Republic of Armenia. I also acknowledge the distinguished colleagues who have traveled to attend this auspicious meeting. Thank you for inviting me. I'm going to talk on Tonga's emergency medical assistance team response to Hunga Ha'apai volcanic eruption on January 15, 2022. TMED was established in 2018 by the Ministry of Health in Tonga and aided by WHO. Training capacity building workshops were conducted in 2018 and 2019, including a simulation exercise. Participants were not only limited to health staff, but other personnel often deployed in emergency situations, such as the police, armed forces, and Red Cross. Workshop to develop the SOP for use in TMED deployment was conducted by a steering committee in March of 2019. This work was completed in 2020. Next. Sorry. TMED cage supplies were supplied and ready for deployment at any time. So where's Tonga? Tonga is a small South Pacific democratic kingdom, southeast of Fiji and south of Samoa. This means that we have pleasant, cooler weather compared to these two islands. It averages 20 to 24 degrees Celsius in April to November and 26 to 30 degrees Celsius in December to March. And yes, you can swim with the whales in Tonga, provided that there's no underwater volcanic eruption or tsunami at the time of your swimming. We have a population of over 100,000, according to our most recent census in 2021. The Hunga Ha'apai underwater volcano had been active since 20th of December 2021. On the 14th of January this year, a tsunami warning was issued, but was later cancelled on the morning of January 15. We all know what happened on January 15th evening. A large, violent eruption of the volcano happened on the same day that triggered a tsunami that swept across the islands of Ha'apai, Tongatapu, and Ewa. A white plume of ashes dispersed throughout the air across the whole of Tonga, contaminating most drinking water supplies in these three islands. This eruption severed the underwater sea cable, thus severing all communications within Tonga and also the outside world. Around 3,000 people were displaced in the immediate aftermath, including some that had to be evacuated from their islands. It was estimated that about 84% of Tonga's population were affected by this tsunami and ashfall. So, Tonga's response, TMED's response. Before I go on to the TMED's response, I think it's important for me to elaborate on the coordinations of our response efforts. The National Emergency Coordination Committee, which NEMC, is chaired by the Minister of MADEC, which is Ministry of Meteorology, Energy, Information, Disaster Management, Environment, and Climate Change. That's a mouthful. It's co-chaired by the Minister of Health and had been activated since March of 2020 because of COVID-19. NEMC members are all the CEOs of government agencies, ministries, some non-government organizations, and relevant stakeholders. Information and recommendations from Ministry of Health is fed to this committee, which in turn is taken up to the Cabinet for endorsement and actions. Through NEMC, we get logistical support from HMAF, which is His Majesty's Armed Forces, for sending our teams as well as supplies to the outer islands. There were several teams that were deployed with different core functions. Our first team was sent on the 16th of January a day after the tsunami, together with other officials from different government agencies to do initial damage assessment and tend to acutely injured and other immediate health needs. There were 5 members of TMET, which made up of 2 doctors and 3 emergency nurses. The 2 doctors were a surgeon and an emergency doctor. The team leader was responsible for reporting back their findings so we can make decisions on next actions. Because the communications was very difficult, reporting was done via the radio, shortwave, I think, from the boat to the army barrack in a previously agreed time that I'll go and wait at the barrack for the reports. Based on the findings of the first team, a second team was sent on the 18th of January to the island of Nomuka, also in the Hapai group, that was very severely affected. The core function of this group was to provide emergency care of injuries, provide health services to those needing care, replenish chronic medication that had been washed away, provide psychosocial support, and address water, sanitation, and hygiene issues. WASH. This was a bigger team of 13, and they were asked to stay for at least 2 weeks. The health center in the island was severely damaged, and therefore the team was also tasked with setting up a temporary health center. The first lot of doctors that we sent, the team leader was a young doctor, and after 2 reports, I soon realized that the responsibility was too much for this young doctor, so I had to send a more senior registrar that had underwent the trainings in 2018 and 19. The island had a population of 320 at the time of the tsunami, and the team too had the longest to stay in the affected area. They stayed longer than 2 weeks. They stayed for about 6 weeks. A third team was sent also, and this team was also just went to get back there was an island that was severely affected. Most of the houses had been washed away by the waves, so they had nowhere to stay, and they chose to be evacuated from the main island to Tongatapu, from their island to the island of Tongatapu. So their assignment of Team 3 was to make sure that the transfer of these patients, the evacuation, went smoothly. A 4th team was also deployed to the island of Hafeva, which is also an island of Hapai, and this was mainly to provide public health services, mainly for water treatment and vector control. The summary of the team deployments I think I jumped that one. They cared for about 381 patients, mostly on the island of Nomuka, taking care mostly of NCD patients. There were a significant number who had some psychological issues, mostly anxiety. Few had diarrheal diseases, which we watched very closely because the water supply was not good at the time, and there were very few traumatic injuries. They supported 5 referrals to higher level care. They assisted in health center repair, relocation, and setup. They also provided health talk and preparation for COVID-19 in Nomuka because COVID-19 arrived in Tonga 2 weeks after the eruption. Provision of public health measures, including wash and vector control, was done by this team and assisted in evacuation of a whole island. The challenges during the TMET deployment, the major challenge that we came through was the communication because of the internet cable that was severed. Fortunately for us, the World Bank office had a spare satellite phone that was used for the communication, and initially it was a daily communicating back to us, and then it went on to every 2 days and then every week telling us what's going on in the island. Poor water supply was also an issue because most of the water tanks had been contaminated and were washed away, damaged. And the boats had limited capacity to carry water because it was also carrying other supplies. Arrival of COVID-19 made replenishment of supplies a logistical nightmare. And also, more than half of the houses on the islands were damaged, making living conditions difficult. The team, however, were supplied with accommodation tents. The key lessons learned from this exercise is: 1, training and capacity building allows identification of relevant people, forming a multidisciplinary team to effectively respond in times of emergencies. Despite resources constraints, preparedness is key to a better response. National emergency medical teams are in a better position to respond to any disaster or emergencies because they know the context and the lay of the land. They can be assisted by international EMTs. And number 4 is coordination is key to successful emergencies. Malo Aupito, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anna. That was really good and, again, really emphasises the point of the importance of having those national emergency teams. But now it's my pleasure to also now invite up our next speaker, Wojtek Wilks, who's going to be talking about the PCPM response to Madagascar with the cyclones and tropical storms.
Good afternoon. My name is Wojtek Wilk. I am the CEO, Chief Executive Officer of the Polish Center for International Aid. So we are like a cake with the 2 big layers. The base layer being the development aid programs, multi-annual programs implemented very often to support the emergency services in African countries. Then the middle layer, probably the thickest one, are the humanitarian aid programs, currently benefiting or done in response to the wars and crises in Lebanon and Syria, as of February this year, also in Ukraine. And currently we have major operations in our home country, even though our name implies that we should be permanently working abroad. And there is a cherry at top of the cake, and you guessed it right. I'm holding you there on yes, and this is the emergency medical team. Because as the NGO, we have been looking how can we most effectively respond to emergencies within the first hours. And for us, embarking on the EMT initiative was probably the way we wanted to develop a rapid response capacity. So the important thing in this concept is that ourselves as an NGO, we are working in 8 countries, Middle East, Ukraine, Georgia, but also several countries in Africa. And we have a regional office in Nairobi, which for that response proved to be crucial. So, for instance, the programs we are doing in Africa is, in Kenya, we are running the only fire brigade college in the whole country. And we have trained about 60% of Kenya's firefighters over the last 7 years. We are implementing numerous emergency medicine and ambulance training and equipment programs in several African countries, mainly East Africa, but also in the Middle East. So, yeah, this is our development work. So the cyclone season in Madagascar was very intensive in the span of the last few months. The island was affected by 5 cyclones within the span of 3 months. So quite an intensive cyclone season, and 2 of the cyclones had the winds reaching almost 100 kilometers an hour. So as you can see from the deployment timeline, After the initial cyclone that has brought catastrophic flooding in many areas of Madagascar, we could even see it with our own eyes in Antananarivo, which is the capital of Madagascar. And later on, the cyclone moved on to the African mainland. That was the second strongest cyclone Batsirai, that arrived made the landfall about 7 or 8 February 2022, and the winds were up to 195 kilometers an hour. Obviously, extensive damage, extensive flooding. The casualties were in a few dozen, but still a large area of this very impoverished island was affected. One thing to say for those of you who are not maybe that much familiar with the Malagasy context is that the southern part of Madagascar, so the part of the island which was most affected by the cyclone, is considerably poorer than the northern part of the island. So, as you can see from the map, the most impoverished areas were affected by the cyclones. Then, in response to that, the strongest cyclone Batsirai, the EMT call for assistance was launched, and as we are part and parcel of the EU civil defense mechanism, as you can see from the EU flag next to the pie. We didn't have much room. We were one of the few EMTs that were light enough and that were able enough to deploy to this emergency. So when also there were another cyclones coming and hitting Madagascar that were not affected that much of the situation, but the approval from the Malagasy authorities came a week later. So we lost a week in terms of deployment, and once we deployed, with multiple problems along the way that I will outline in a minute, there was another storm that came, the cyclone Emati, that has stranded us in the capital of Madagascar for another about 4 days. So only about 24, 25 February, we were able to reach the ground and the affected areas. The main challenge, and this is what I wanted to really focus on, is that we were deploying to an island, which to our complete surprise, had no available flights. I mean, I have seen quite a few emergency contexts, but this was the first time ever where there were like no flights. Normally, as you can see from the map, Madagascar gets the flights from Istanbul, from Addis Ababa, from Paris Charles de Gaulle, from Nairobi, from Johannesburg, from Mauritius, as well as some chartered planes, among the ones chartered by the ANHAS, the UN Humanitarian Air Service, or the EU. When we were deploying, there was nothing. There were 2 EU flights that were just in completely different times and didn't have the cargo capacity. We had no ways to get to the island. And there was a struggle because we are an NGO. We cannot afford to hire a transport aircraft for about $200,000 one way. This was the biggest challenge, how to get to the island. We looked for all available options. There were no seats. The seats on the first available flight from Paris was for about 20th of March. So about 1 month after we were supposed to deploy. So we had to charter an aircraft. And this was done only because we had an operating base in Nairobi. And in Nairobi, we were able to charter the biggest aircraft available there. There were no transport aircraft available in Kenya. The biggest one was this old tin can, the Embraer 120, which has the cargo capacity of 3 tons. So we had to fit in those 3 tons all of our personnel and all of our supplies. So in case of our full deployment EMT weight, it's about 4.5 tons. We are quite light because we're an NGO and we cannot rely on transport aircraft from our own government. But in this case, we really had to go down on the amount of supplies we are carrying, but also on the number of team members that are flying on the aircraft. And I was just laughing that as this aircraft had 30 seats and we had to place the bags, and the personnel on the seats were literally making a Tetris. Doctor, bag. Nurse, 2 bags. Paramedic, 1 bag, and so on, because this was not only the weight was the limitation, but also the volume. Also, which was quite frustrating, is that due to some unknown reasons to me, we waited about 3 days to get the landing permit. in Madagascar. So those bureaucratic obstacles were piling up, delaying the response. Even though we were geared up to go in Nairobi, things were not happening. But when we got to the ground, this is how it looked like. I mean, on the face value, it looks bad, but as you can see on the right side of the screen, the huts are standing, and actually the huts had even running water, and there was even a way to get the food. So when we get on the ground, interestingly, there were only 3 rapid response teams that managed to get to Madagascar and respond to this emergency. 2 water purification units from France and Germany. The French government sent a big team of about 60 personnel. The German team was about 15. Ours was 13 personnel as a kind of downscaled type 1 EMT. We, as the EMT deployed under the auspices of the European Union, we were coordinating, obviously, with the EMT coordination cell and the Malagasy Ministry of Health, but also with the EU Civil Protection Team, which was on the ground. And we had the kind of quite unexpected double reporting lines, but it worked pretty well at the end of the day. So we brought with us about 1.7 tons of supplies. So when we look at the guidelines, it may sound that this is quite limited weight, but as you can see from the listing, because the conditions were not completely, the damage was not complete, and there were several structures standing, much of the self-sufficiency supplies that we brought along were not needed, and we ended up donating them. So as you can see here, we are testing our water purification systems on before deployment down to Narivo, and putting up the solar panels. Interestingly, one of the ways to calm down on weight, we as the EMT were relying a lot on solar panels and backup batteries. So we ended up donating those supplies to local health clinics. So the team. This was also another interesting experience for us, because we did not work as the standard type 1 fixed EMT, because there was not such a need. As you could see, the healthcare facilities were standing. They were not very much affected, but there was a lot of flooded areas, a lot of areas with limited access. So our downscale type 1 fixed was broken into 2 mobile teams that have worked in two facilities along the coast in the most affected areas. Called Manakara and Voipeno. And the work on the ground lasted about 10 days. And I would assume it would have lasted longer, but we are the Polish EMT, and we had the war in Ukraine breaking out next door. And well, I had to bring the EMT back to Poland. But also, by the about 10th day of our presence, we were done. On the medical side, you know, the difficult part of the mission was to get to Madagascar, was actually to get deployed. Once we got on the ground, this was our 12th or 11th deployment since the classification in 2019, and I don't know, about 18th deployment in general. We knew what to do. I mean, this was downhill. So as you can see, you know, we brought some, for instance, the mobile ultrasonography and the examinations were done in the existing clinics. Really, no need to go with our own structures and so on. So best practices and lessons learned. I am a huge proponent, and I really encourage you to consider sending an advanced team when there is even a sudden onset emergency. If we had an opportunity to have either 1 or 2 persons on the ground, we would have prepared better, we have packed better, and so on. This was not possible because of the flights, but now we have a standard operating procedure that whenever it goes, we are sending first 1 or 2 persons in advance to manage the expectations, check on the conditions on the ground, make sure this is we are responding in the best available fashion. Secondly, our interesting experience was how to coordinate with the various stakeholders, with EMTCC, at the same time with the European Commission Civil Protection Team, and ANDAC was there around. But also in Madagascar, we found quite frustrating practice that helicopters were used for, or airplanes were used for transporting assessment teams. People were buzzing their helicopter and on the helicopter affected areas, and we spent 2 days driving on overland in the cars, while we could have flown there for about an hour, which was a bit of a waste from our point of view. I think that the big advantage of the NGO EMTs, especially those NGOs that have foreign presence, is that we are able to pre-position our supplies in the places where we work And those locations could be closer to the places where we are deployed. So, for instance, in case of PCPM, the fact that we had the hub, storage facilities, pre-position equipment in Nairobi, it really saved us the day, because without it, we wouldn't be able to deploy at all. We have proven also to ourselves that the Type 1 fixed can get really subdivided into 2 or 3, depending on the staffing, mobile teams. And here I really wanted to appreciate the assistance of WHO office in Madagascar that has supported us with the cars, and it was a great support from the WHO office. Well, our biggest achievement is that we managed to arrive in Madagascar despite against the old odds, but as you could see, we had to travel light, and that's why we would be probably now prioritizing what is the most important part of our equipment, and really putting it in order of packing, so that we can, even if we have to go on with a limited weight, we can still deliver, even if we have 1.5 tons of supplies, for instance. And our last lessons learned, because literally within a week of arriving from Madagascar, the team already deployed to the Polish-Ukrainian border. It is tough. It is really tough to do back-to-back missions, especially if you are an NGO EMT. And that was a struggle, the next mission. So thank you very much for the attention. My details are on the screen, but as you can see, within a week or 2 weeks of arriving from Madagascar, we were already transporting the patients from Ukraine, in this case to Germany. Thank you very much.
Thank you ever so much. That was really interesting, particularly learning more about kind of the logistical issues that you had in Madagascar as well. But I'm delighted now to introduce Dr. Elliot Tenpenny, who is going to be talking about the recent Haiti earthquake, less recent, happened in 2021, about Samaritan's Purse deployment.
Thank you. My name is Elliot Tenpenny. I work with Samaritan's Purse, and I've been privileged to be part of almost 30 major disaster responses over the last 5 years. Disaster responses in war zones, diphtheria responses, cholera, Ebola, even in Central Park to an unknown outbreak at the time. But really, none of that matters. None of it matters at all. In the words of Dr. Ryan yesterday, what matters is the compassion that we have for the clinical care for the next person in front of us. And I really feel that key to it here is not just talking about what we do in the next response or giving you a detailed analysis, but really sharing in honesty our failings, so you and the broader EMT group don't make the same mistakes. I've been told that in lectures like this, if your audience walks away with learning 3 or 4 things, that's a success. So we'll try to keep this brief and down to just a few in number. After the earthquake, which was in August of 2021 in the southern part of Haiti, Samaritan's Purse deployed a field hospital of a new design that we'll talk about to the Lakai area quickly after that event. It was a 36-bed field hospital and ended up performing over 125 surgeries. It stood in for the local healthcare system in that area because of this destruction in the town, and was a local referral area. But really, this is the point. This is the 4 things, the real lessons learned of our deployment. I won't bore you with the details of the entire deployment, but just the meat of it is expediency, speed. That's what matters in these events. Utilizing new models and thinking in new ways to be able to do the same things that you've done before because of new constraints that are present at the time. Dealing with local transportation logistics issues, which are always present, but in some places impede access as much as permissions or anything else does. And then lastly, one thing that constantly is a thorn, if you want to do surgical field hospitals, is maintaining a narcotic or controlled medication supply chain. We don't talk about these things very often, but in the meat of it, past the EMT standards, which are good, but they're a base level. Yes, we should be self-sufficient. Yes, we should be able to get out with speed, but there's an entire other level of quality above that that I want to dig into in these few points. expediency in decision making. This is critical for these responses, especially an earthquake response like this. Getting from the point of event to decision made to deployed on the field has to be as quickly as possible. The data shows if you're not there in the first 72 hours, everyone that's hurt or dying is dead by then. If you want to make the impact, you have to get there in speed. And really people think, oh, well, you can do this because you have airframe capacity. And that's not speed. Speed is actually the organization's ability to get from event to decision made that we're going as quickly as possible. So what goes into every organization, every government level EMT is different in this, but removing as much red tape from the time the event happens to the time the trigger is pulled in what the WHO calls a no regrets approach is critical to this. Our problem was actually a model problem. The model of responses that we've had for surgical hospitals didn't fit this application. As we'll talk about later, there were some logistic challenges that really prevented us from going and doing what we had done around the world. So we really had a few options. You really have three options when you're prevented to get from the field for certain issues. You can not go. You can go with a smaller component, something that really doesn't meet the need, or you can reevaluate your entire model and rebuild on the fly to be able to go into a new area. And that's what we did. We have what we call our Tier 1 surgical hospital, our Type 1 surgical, which is not within the WHO standard, but it is a Type 2 capacity that's incredibly austere and basic. It can focus on certain applications of a surgical need, in this case orthopedics, and that was pretty much it. In certain cases, like this one in Mozambique in 2019, obstetrics, and that's all. So it's a focused unit that has very little creature comforts, comes with a minimal staffing component that allows you to get out in places with just what can be hand carried in small bags and small boxes. That allowed us to go to Haiti in 2021. Using this component, we were able to build a very small hospital that ended up being able to treat a very large number of people. Being able to be adaptable in the field, not only self-sufficient in the ability to create your own electricity, your water, but be able to adaptable to whatever sites you find, whatever needs you find is key. Secondly, though, when you change quickly to meet the needs of the field, you go out with staff that are unprepared for the new challenges that they'll face, providing the kind of care they're used to in other environments in this new place. So with this new model, we struggled ourselves, getting our own staff comfortable with the operating theater. What do you mean I cannot do this kind of surgery or this kind of thing? I should be able to do that. No, this is a focused unit to get as much done for as many people as we possibly can initially in this field or in this realm. This is a picture of the operating theater within that realm that served those 150 patients. We were able to do incredible high quality things, but knowing we had certain limits and levels, we weren't going to be doing reconstructive things. We're going to be there for a very short period of time. I'm trying to go to the next slide and it's not working for me. There it is. All right, local transportation. This is the logistics challenge. Really, to be honest with you, one of the biggest challenges we had in this sudden onset disaster was the security issues in the areas between us and the main airport within the country of Haiti. They were significant at the time and they were challenging to get through. So again, you have three options. You can go around that with a smaller component, you can not go at all, or you can redesign what you're going to bring to be applicable to that environment. And logistically, that's what we did. We redesigned a hospital to be able to be hand carried and be able to be brought in by air over the certain specific issues. But it takes a prioritization. It takes preparing your entire team for what they're going to find and really not find with your capacity on the ground. And it's a coordination of other organizations on the ground when you get there to maintain speed, because again, speed is the main factor. It's the main importance. There was, just to say it again, speed and quickness to the field being so critical. we have to be honest with ourselves. We didn't get there in the first 72 hours or shortly thereafter, but after our 30, 45-day response time, there were still teams that were saying we're mobilizing. After 30 days, it no longer matters to a great extent in the acute phase of that response. So we have to be honest with ourselves also and paint the picture and understand that as our goal as the EMT, speed should be predominant. Speed for us looks like this a lot of times, pre-packed modules and pallets able to be moved by airframes, but it also looks much more simple. Things that can just be loaded on the back of helicopters, can be hand carried in, and can build large field hospitals out of very simple components. Lastly, and in honesty, one of the biggest things, whether we talk about it or not in these meetings, is supply chain, especially narcotics and controlled medications. It has been one of the biggest challenges worldwide, over 30 responses. Number one, getting things into country that have significant laws in place. You have to work with your Ministry of Health, you have to work with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and other things, and ideally, you can partner with the ministry, and they can provide some of these things, or secondarily, ideally, they can give waivers to be able to provide them yourself and import them. Sometimes this is the only thing that prevents us from starting work initially with a hospital to take care of those that are wounded after a sudden disaster. Hospitals there, staff's there, operating theaters ready to go. Narcotic supply is still lagging. It's still stuck in a capital, it's stuck in a customs, it's stuck in paperwork. Whatever we can do as EMTs and also as local governments to facilitate that process will really speed up the amount of care we can bring to people. So we have some challenges I wanted to share with you honestly. Successes, being able to get out there as the first Type 2 facility that was able to provide surgical capacity, meeting a gap of needs was important, especially with orthopedics after an earthquake. The other part is the transition out, making plans with your ministry, who you're invited by for your transition period. We're going to be there for X amount of days, or the need gets to this level, so you don't create issues on your exit. And then lastly, thinking in ways, just like we heard in the last lecture, lightweight designs to not just be able to go out and take care of outpatient needs, but to even take care of very complex surgical needs in the lightest way possible, despite logistical challenges. That's all. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. And I was very fortunate enough to also visit this Samaritan's Purse type hospital while I was in Haiti with the IFRC, and all of your lessons learned really resonate with me as well. But now to our penultimate speaker. So I would like to invite up Corona to the stage as well, who's going to be talking about Muhammadiya's national EMT response. So if I could welcome you up, please.
Thank you. First of all, just want to say my birth name is really Corona. You can Google it, and I think they're the one who copy my name. The second, don't blame me for what is happening for the last 3 years. It's not my fault. And I would like to introduce first the organization of Muhammadiyah. Muhammadiyah is one of the oldest and the second largest Islamic organization in Indonesia. It was established in 1912, and we are focusing on 3 main areas: health, education, and social movement. And also we helping the suffer people. And since then, now we have hundreds of hospitals, universities, schools, and orphanages. And now we are getting improved. We are expecting our emergency medical team to be verified as the international EMT Type 1 fix. So what I want to share with you is our experience during the national deployment of our EMT. For your information, at that time, Indonesia did not have a guideline for the national EMT yet. So that we have to come up with our standard, of course, Muhammadiyah version, adapted with the international standard of the EMT. So what we are focusing are first, we set up a general consent, and we set up the standard administrative for the volunteers, and also we set up the additional logistic, health protocols before, during, and after deployment. We make a protocol for quarantine during and after the deployment. And of course, because we are deployed during the pandemic situation, we established the COVID-19 testing protocol before, during, and after deployment. At that time, we don't have that kind of guideline in Indonesia yet. So the additional procedures that we are established are the personal preparation, no comorbid disease for all the volunteers, because we don't want to, like, old doctors or nurses got COVID and get sick, and not in the therapy of the certain disease like cardiovascular or stroke or diabetes, something like that. There's no comorbid condition for the volunteers. And also, of course, the COVID-19 screening and testing before deployment must negative. And for the document preparation, we do the examination or result of the COVID. They must show the result of the COVID-19 test. And also, they must show to us the certificate of health from their hospitals. For the personal logistic, we must, we determine that they must have the hand sanitizers, the mask, N95 mask, and disinfectant, and also extra clothes. And for the team logistic, the PPE, of course, for preparation during the deployment, extra 10, because it was deployed during the pandemic. So we have to come up with the isolation 10, and extra facility for decontamination station. Of course, the specific personnel and procedure for the decontamination, and also the specific SOP for the medical waste, especially for the PPE. And of course, the rapid diagnosis test. This is standard for the briefing and meeting procedures. It's kind of quite different than the general condition. Team briefing conducted online by Zoom. Logistic preparation performed on the scheduled basis, and alternately, personal logistic and medical logistic basic needs to prevent COVID-19 spreading are prioritized. For example, PPE. And the restricted number of the participants in any meeting and must be conducted in well-ventilated room or outdoor. So we told the team that every briefing daily must be conducted in the well-ventilated room or in the outdoor. This is our modification for the EMT facility. We increase open space to maintain the air circulation. So we open the window and etc. Maintain health protocols during health services. Build specific tent for decontamination process, because one of the members of the team must be sent to outside the facility. So if they come back to the EMT facility, they must decontaminate it first. And of course, define specific area to manage medical waste, especially PPE. This is modification of delivering health services methods. Patient companion only one person. If you are aware, in Indonesia, usually if one person sick and the family, like one truck, like 5 or 10 people who accompany the sick person. So we come up with the protocol, strict protocol, only one person who accompany for the one sick person. Every patient must wear mask. Then we also provide them in our facility in case that the patient or the family don't have the mask. Every medical person must maintain health protocol, especially IPC procedures. In end of the day, medical tent must be cleaned up and sprayed with the disinfectant, or just wash the tent, all the desks and chairs with the disinfectant. For the volunteer clinic, we did the examine health condition of every volunteer every night. And we test the temperatures and the symptoms that they may have, and of course to assure that health condition and probability of COVID-19 infection with the symptoms. Distribute vitamin after health examination, and every day we give them the vitamin. Must require exercise every morning just to maintain their well condition. Examination must be reported to medical coordinator. This must be done daily. So this is the COVID-19 screening procedure during our deployment. Performed periodically every 3 or 5 days during the deployment. So if we are deployed for the 2 weeks, like we must do like 5 or 7 COVID-19 screening. And perform incidentally if there's any person indicated with COVID-19 infection outside the routine screening. Perform in end of or on ground duty before every personnel return to the home base, just to make sure that they don't bring the infection to their family or their home base institution. Challenges during deployment. Of course, we are facing multi-hazard disaster. For your information, and Indonesia is kind of disaster laboratory. Our National Disaster Management Agency reports there is increase 1,000 disaster event each year. So it's kind of challenges. And of course, the pandemic condition make it more harder for us to deploy to the natural hazard. Complexity of the personnel capacity, team logistic, and facility modification and also increase. We must provide the PPE, the disinfectant, the mask, and 95, etc. Assessing affected area regarding COVID-19 management, tracing, testing, treatment, and referral system is a must. And we must coordinate well with the local Department of Health. And sometimes it's not easy because even though we are coordinate with the Department of Health, they also don't prepare for it. So it's kind of very challenging. Transmission risk of COVID-19 is higher in infected area because the refugee, yes, you are aware that it's very difficult to do the managing the social distance, something like that. And every patient must be suspected COVID-19 until proven negative. Lesson learned. EMT response for IOST during COVID-19 pandemic can be conducted with the specific health protocols. Yes. Logistics, especially PPE and institutional facility regarding COVID-19 pandemic have an important role during this deployment. Adequate understanding from each personnel about the health protocol during deployment need to be improved and monitored closely. And assessing effective area regarding the COVID-19 management, tracing, testing, treatment, and referral system is a must, is a mandatory. And the last, the emergency procedures regarding COVID-19 must be prepared as early as possible. So this is our report, the output from our monitoring. So if you can see that it's quite good for the percentage of the it's in Bahasa Indonesia. The right side is the comorbid, and then the person is there's no comorbid, and we don't have kind of the non-therapies, and using the mask is also reach the 86% of the patient, and we do the separate bedroom and separate lunch or dinners and something like that. It's kind of very high. Of course, and the individual health protocol also reached 79.7%. It's kind of, yeah, I think it's quite good. And this is what we have during our deployment is for the first deployment, we only reached 5% that got infected COVID-19. And for the second deployment in the East Nusa Tenggara, we only have 3% of our volunteers who got infected COVID-19. This is the full report, in Bahasa Indonesia. We have total patients is 2,619 for the first response, and then the second response is 2,890 person. So thank you. I hope it will be useful for us.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And I'm sure all of us here can really resonate with the challenges that you've experienced during COVID-19. But just before I invite up our final speaker, we're running quite on time, so I'm hoping we'll have some time for some questions and answers after our final speaker's presentation. But I'm just going to invite Marta up, and apologies if I butcher the name. We were just practicing my Spanish pronunciation before we came on stage. But Marta's going to be talking about ICID. Perfect. And about their kind of adaptation and evolution with the latest Blue Book in particular. So if I can invite you up, please.
So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having us today, both to the Armenian part of the organization and for WHO. Today I want to present a short overview of the evolution of the EMT2 START. START stands for Spanish Technical Aid Response Team. It's the EMT2 that is managed by the Spanish Cooperation Agency. That is to say, it belongs to the Spanish administration. It's just some 10 slides. I would first like to go over the most recent upgrades, many of which have been financed by DG ECHO. Then I'd like to go to talk about what we think are our best practices, both from the point of view of the facilities and from the point of view of the human team. And then finally, just some final remarks and challenges for the near future for us. I will talk about the medical and the WASH side too, but most of the aspects I cover will be from the logistics side. So starting with the upgrades. First one, climate preparedness. One of the main issues of the first hospital, it was classified in 2018. The project started in 2016, but the hospital was classified in 2018 as an EMT2. One of the biggest issues was the lack of climatization. It was identified already in the classification process, but especially in the first deployment, the only one that has been as an actual EMT2 in Mozambique in 2019. So one of the biggest expenditures, if not the biggest one by itself, has been buying air conditioning for the tents and the corresponding generators to operate them. The first tents were the ones that you can see to the left of the slide, and now we have other tents too. And the first ones were donated, they stay in Mozambique, and are much easier to construct too. They are, and well, the best thing is that they are air conditioned, of course. and especially for the surgical area, the inpatient area, the resuscitation area. And we still have some other tents, metallic arc for other structures, for example, for the resting areas or for just giving shadows. But this would have been the major change in the structure of the hospital. Second, packing systems. They have also improved greatly. The first pictures would also be from the Mozambique deployment. So, three main aspects. The packing system that we have established as the reference one would be the wooden frame packing. It can be used for multiple purposes. It is reusable, and it allows for not using plastic. That's why it gets the green star on the slide. And it aligns with our greening objectives too. Secondly, we have bought peli cases to protect the electronic and the electric equipment. Some of them, they had some kind of protection, but some of them did get damaged during transportation in some of the deployments. And finally, we bought shelves and cabinets just to allow us to operate more earlier when we are setting up the tents, and we have ready-made medicine cabinets that can be opened just as we get to the site. And for example, we have some that are ready with the medicines for the first 72 hours. So even though the whole hospital is not set up, some specific area, for example, the surgical area or the pediatric surgery, can be set up in the first hours of the deployment. Equipment standardization. So of course, we have tried to reduce the variety of models, generators models, pumps models, tents models, as I was saying, connections models, water connections, electrical connections, so that first the staff is familiar with all the equipment. It's easier to have less kind of equipment, and of course, it's easier to have spare parts for this equipment if there are less models, and it's cheaper on the long term. You have photos of some. This is our warehouse in Torrejón de Ardoz in Madrid. It's in a hangar, so it is very close to the airstrip, but it could directly flow to the deployment site. And below to the right, you have the standard kit of tools that the different teams can use when we are constructing the hospital. We have the kit tools for the log team, for the wash team, for the different parts of the hospital, and they are in the pallets. They are with the area which would they be used to construct, so that it's also easier to start the assembly. Simplification. So we also have tried to simplify, first with the procedures for construction where possible. The first hospital relied a lot on wooden structures, which was cheaper for us in that moment, but of course this takes more time and more risk for the staff, but especially not for the logists, but for the medical staff that are not trained in using these kind of tools and have to set up parts of the hospital. And you get an example of the latrines there. This is from a drill in October in Madrid. And new latrines that we have bought, latrines and showers that could be used for some of the deployments. Easier to clean too. They can be piled and they can be used to transport things in the plane and don't use up that much space too. And below we have also tried to simplify operation procedures. Electronics have not helped sometimes on site, as I guess has happened to everyone. To the left we have down in the slide our water treatment plant. It's fantastic and it has ultrafiltration and it can provide high quality water for all the hospital. But we also have other simpler systems that can be constructed on site even for the filtration of water and can be used either as a backup or for some parts of the hospital that don't need such high quality water. And so it is also important to take into consideration. Less electronics, not only in this, but in other aspects. Use of solar energy. This would also be in line with our greening objectives. We have a newly purchased photovoltaic system, some 20 panels, and the associated electronic devices. This is used to give light to all the tents in the inside, and it can also be used to charge small devices such as computers, mobile phones, And it is also used to charge the water device that we use to generate sodium hypochlorite on site so that we don't have to transport chloride, and we use it for the treatment of water and for the disinfection. Generates the sodium hypochlorite through electrolysis. And then for the outdoor lighting, which we didn't have before in the old hospital, there are solar large charged lamps that operate individually. This is an improvement also on the safety part, as before there was no outdoor lighting. And then, the easiest part, the showers operated directly by the sun. Depending on the deployment, they can be used or not, depending on the outer temperature. So they are 10-liter individual showers that are directly charged by the sun. Improved wash and logistics capacities. So for this, mainly we have purchased pumps, onions, and bladders for the storage for the open and closed storage of water, and also fecal sludge that could be necessary for in the case of infectious diseases. We have also bought water containers for hand washing in order to have to throw less water connections, water lines. And also from the logistics side, maybe the most important thing, the UPSs for the protection of the equipment. They can also act as battery in the case of power that the power supply goes down, but mainly to protect the equipment. We already had protection systems for the electronic equipment, but some of the equipment, the electromedical equipment especially, suffered some damages because of the peaks of the currents with the generators. And in any case, the most important thing from this slide is that our team is especially strong on the logistics and on the wash side. In fact, we have only one medical expert. So in ICID, in the Spanish agency, the Spanish Cooperation Agency, we have 3 people that are dedicated to emergencies, and we cover the EMT2. Maybe you saw Roberto talking yesterday about the 3 hats of the Spanish Cooperation. And so one of the hats would be this EMT2, but we also have direct operations for wash and for logistics. And the START team also deploys in this kind of activities. So it is not only dedicated to the hospital. And that's too why the START team is strong in these aspects. The medical team comes from a roster of volunteers that work all along the Spanish public system in different hospitals across the country. And below are some pictures from humanitarian aid shipments. The START team also helps with the logistics and distribution of these shipments. And the most recent upgrades would be on the medical side. Some equipment were bought, and a Scopia X-ray arc, not sure about the name right now, Piccolo analyzer, cell counter, some small devices to increase the capacity of the hospital, the quality of the treatment more, and the agility of the treatments. And the main purchase has been the oxygen plant, the oxygen generation plant, which we are thinking of establishing as an independent capacity, and for which you have, in the stand you can see all of the technical details. You have a mini video with 3D virtual reality, but mainly it consists of 3 modules that can be transported by air, and it can supply air for filling oxygen for filling bottles, independent bottles, or either for supplying oxygen for 10 patients at a time that would be in need of intensive care. And finally, we are developing a software for hospital management, which should be finalized by December if everything goes well, so that we would be paperless by then, and we would be able to have the digital history for the patient since the patient comes into the hospital until the patient is discharged. All the areas of the hospital would be connected. Also, the warehouse in the hospital would be connected to our own warehouse in Madrid, so as to be able to organize what we need to send for the next deployment, for the next rotation within the deployment. And I guess that would be all from the part of of the upgrades. So our best practices. We would like to think that our best practices from the part of the facilities would be that it's more flexible now, it's more modular. We have only deployed once as an EMT2, so really we are acting more as an kind of specialized cells or EMT1, in fact. And we would like to go on to, as I said, to deploy with specialized units, such as the oxygen one. Then, we have achieved lower deployment times. But the problem is that we will have to establish a balance between how much we can go down in an environment where the international teams deploy in. It takes a little bit of time for the international teams to deploy, so there has to be a balance in how much effort we put into lowering these times when then the team is not deployed in such a short time. And finally, the biggest best practice, I guess, is that for the moment we are self-sufficient. From the logistics side, the wash side, what we would need if we were to be deployed somewhere, we would need a truck. That's what we wouldn't have now because we would have the Caterpillar to be able to deploy and we wouldn't have the fuel, of course. And from the side of the human factor, well, the first thing would be the team. The team is working, it's on a very good spot right now. There you can see the historic 3 coordinators of the team. The first 2 in the blue vest are working for WHO and PAHO right now. You know, many of you will know them already. And Paco with the red vest is luckily with us still. And then below are some of the doctors that, as I said, worked for the hospital, for the Spanish public system, for the Spanish public health system, and that do deploy with the hospital when needed, through an agreement with the Ministry of Health. Then Paco, who is the coordinator, as I said now, is a mentor with the EMT initiative. So this will help us with our objective right now, which is to center in strengthening the local national teams. In the pictures below to the left, you can also see that it's very important for us, and we think that it's a characteristic of the whole of the Spanish cooperation to have a close integration with the local teams, medical teams in this case, but in general with the national authorities and the local authorities and with the local communities. And apart from doing actions for this independently, we do direct actions for strengthening local teams, such as in the right below, you can see a mission to Bolivia that were organized by PAHO this year, and where 2 of us were deployed mainly for logistics and wash training. And finally, some final remarks on challenges. So on the technical side, we have made many upgrades, and we don't have any real challenge right now. We have upgraded the logistics side. We are now quite independent, and what is left for us are more administrative and strategic challenges. As was mentioned before by my colleagues, there's a bigger need for coordination, both before the deployment and during the deployments, and lower flight availability, which is a huge issue for us, as if we were to deploy the EMT2, it's really very high volume what we need to move. Apart, the fuel prices are going up, which is also a very important issue. For us, as we don't have the medical staff in our organization, this is too one of the biggest issues, as we depend on this for the deployments, and it has been an issue specifically during the pandemic, which we hope this is solved after the medical staff is needed less on the actual hospitals. And as I was mentioning before, we have to take a look at the balance that we put on lowering our deployment times, when in general deployment times for international teams are not that quick. So maybe we are only gaining a few hours, and if we are expanding our volume to be deployed, it might not make much sense in doing that. And greening stays as a challenge for us, maybe taking more minor steps, but taking into consideration that anyway the deployment of international EMTs is not environmentally friendly, and the more environmentally friendly thing to do is to focus on, as we intend to focus, on the strengthening of national teams, which is what I guess the initiative is going for and has changed a lot since it was born years ago. And with that, thank you for your attention. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Marta, and I think you touched on a really important point as well about greening our response and kind of always adapting and improving what we have within our EMTs. But just before we move to the last 5 minutes, where we have some time for 1 or 2 questions maybe, I would just like to express my thanks for everyone on the panel, and just wonder if we could just give everyone another round of applause for their fantastic presentations today. So I wonder if is there a handheld mic? Tim has the handheld mic. So does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask a member of our panel? I can't see anyone, I'm afraid. I'm a bit blinded by the lights. We have a question. If you don't mind also introducing yourself, that would also be great.
Hello. Thank you. First of all, thank you for the presentation. It was quite fruitful. My name is Hüseyin Çıtak from Turkey, from Turkish Red Crescent. My question is about PCPM. I'm wondering that do you think any change for the future? Like, do you think to change the EMT setup or the list of equipments? Now you're reflecting on Madagascar. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. We'll be definitely looking into various types of shelters because we have pretty good, quite durable Polish tents in our main warehouse. We will be probably pre-positioning another set of tents in Africa. But Tim was our EMTCC in Madagascar, and he has seen us deploying quite another approach. Because for Madagascar, so a place which is hot and which is extremely humid with torrential rains, I remember taking a phone call, being in the rain, and I was soaked through in like 3 minutes, and I had my rain jacket on me. We are looking into piloting the use of what is called the IKEA houses, or the refugee housing units. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the photos of this when I used them in Madagascar, but those are the structures that have a floor space of 17.5 square meters. They are made of plastic, and they are extremely durable, and even more so, they are extremely rainproof. And they're light, they are 160 kilograms. So if we are to build an outpatient clinic somewhere in an area and leave it there for the benefit of the local population, well, that's one of the options we're looking into. Thank you very much for the question.
Brilliant, thank you. I think we've got time for 1 more question before we let everyone go for a coffee. I can't see anything, I'm afraid, Tim.
Thank you everybody for this incredible panel. Dr. Vic, I was deployed in Madagascar as a team leader of the European Union Civil Protection team, and I have to underline the excellent work your team did. All the feedback from the Madagascar local authorities was excellent, and a reflection, well, we are human beings, and I had the opportunity to talk with your team there about the situation of the stroke of the Ukraine war. So for them it was a real pity to leave the country, because it's important to say that the Polish medical team attend patients that was the first time they undergo a medical visit, a medical attention. So the people from Madagascar was almost crying when the police team leave the country in order to attend the population of Poland. But just my intervention is to say thank you for all the work you did. Excellent work.
Thank you very much. I mean, you make me blush. But I am also very grateful to UCPT and the UNDAC because we have used your helicopters to transport the patients who required surgeries from deep field to Antananarivo, and you guys saved lives also by providing transportation, which without helicopter rides, those people would have died. So thank you to you as well.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much for your questions, but we'll finish our session here. So again, just a thank you from myself, and thank you for everyone in the room as well for your attention.
I think so. Now we can check the phones.
Thank you.